All right. Yes. Thank you, Erin, for fixing that. We are now live. Okay. I'm going to do that again.
Yes, here we go.
My name is Sophie Goldstein, and I am a professional. So I am a cartoonist and an illustrator and a comics educator. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I've been for the past couple years as a Tulsa Artist Fellow. I am the author of a few graphic novels, 2 of them with Jenn. Our first book we did in 2014, which was a collection of our webcomic, Darwin Carmichael's Going to Hell. And we have our latest book that just came out in March of this year called An Embarrassment of Witches. And then I also have independently done The Oven, which was published by Ad House in 2015. And House of Women, which was published by Fantagraphics in 2017. So that is me. I have posted a link to my Patreon on the chat. So if any of you are interested in learning more about me or following my work, that would be a good place to do it. And now I will hand the proverbial mic over to Jenn.
Excellent. Hi. And I just dropped your link in this chat stream too, because I think it was in the other one that we put your link before. Hi, I am Jenn Jordan. And as Sophie has already covered, I'm the co-author of An Embarrassment of Witches and Darwin Carmichael is Going to Hell. My other foot, as it were, is in academia. I'm working on a PhD in medieval history, and I teach at SUNY Stony Brook. But I'm very excited to talk about this comic with you, where I get to sort of combine my interests in medieval history and especially medieval medicine with our fantasy setting. And I will drop my link to Twitter. I don't really have a Patreon or a portfolio, but I do have a place where I put, dumb things I've thought.
I will say that for anybody who doesn't know, Jenn is like really good at Twitter. it's a very special skill. No, like, I mean, you've had like a trending tweet, and you have the running thing with license plates and like lots of good pop culture references. So if anybody wonders where those come in our comics, they're not from me. So yeah, I can't highly recommend following Jenn on Twitter enough.
Thank you.
Follow me on Twitter, mostly you'll just get angry retweets of like political things and pictures of my cats. Not as many pictures of cats recently, much higher on the angry political retweets. So you've been warned. All right, so the format of today's showcase is a mutual interview / love fest. So Jenn will do the first like searing question.
Yes, here we go. I've prepared a series of questions, each more fiendish than the last for you. And so let's go. What page or pages in An Embarrassment of Witches are you most proud of?
Oof, that's a tough one, Jenn. Well, so I would say that I think for me, the pages I'm most proud of are the ones that were most difficult to draw. I guess that probably seems pretty obvious. But the book is set in Pittsburgh, even though I don't think we actually say Pittsburgh at any single point, but that's where I was living for most of the time that we were writing it and when I was starting to draw it. And I wanted it to feel like it was like really located in a specific place. So we have a lot of like Pittsburgh buildings and locations that are in the book. And one of them is the Cathedral of Learning, which is, it's a building that's part of the University of Pittsburgh campus. And it's a giant Gothic cathedral filled with classrooms that are each themed around a different country. This building was made in the like 1920s or early 30s. So just like keep that in mind when I'm saying that. But so yeah, so for someone who doesn't like to draw buildings, I was drawing, let's see if I can find it in here. So I drew this Gothic cathedral scene, and I felt pretty good about that. And it took a really long time. So I think that that is probably the scene that I am the most proud of drawing.
Nice.
So
that's one of my favorite pages. That whole scene, I think, is just really incredible. It was a great, I don't know, it was really fun to sort of like determine the place a scene would take place in first, and then just determine like what would happen in the scene almost, because I think we kind of knew we wanted to use that building before we knew what we were going to do in that scene. So yeah, it turned out super interesting, I think.
yeah, we actually like before, at some point before we started writing the book, or when we had already started, you came and visited me in Pittsburgh, and we did like a locations tour.
Yes. Oh.
Which was really more of an excuse to just like hang out in Pittsburgh. But we did go there, and we also went to the botanical, the Phipps Botanical Garden, which is also in the book. So we did actually like do some actual scouting.
We did, and it was like you know, it was a nice new addition to our general writing dynamic, I think, because almost everything that we've written at a distance from each other, like while we're living in different cities or different countries. And so to be in the same place and really get to take advantage of being in the same place in a way you couldn't in any other way was really nice.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, now I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is your favorite scene in An Embarrassment of Witches?
I think my favorite scene, and it was my favorite to write, I think is what I'm going to go with, is the scene where Angela, who is one of the protagonists, comes home from work to find that her roommate Rory has abandoned a sidewalk sale that she was having. She was having a sidewalk sale in order to downsize so that she could move into Angela's closet, which sort of, you know, tells you where Rory is in her life at that exact moment. So Angela picks up the sidewalk sale and goes inside and has a really fun conversation with her familiar, because in our book, witches naturally have animal familiars. And so she gets dressed down by an angry hedgehog. And I think it was just a really fun scene to write. It was the scene that in writing it, the characters finally clicked for me. And I feel like I sort of internalized who they were and what their dynamic was. And I just really loved how you drew it. Like you just rendered like the characters so great, and there's like a lot of like really good visual humor that you inserted into the scene.
I did really like writing Archie and Rhonda, the two animal familiars. Archie, or Archimedes, is like Rory's owl familiar, and Rhonda is Angela's hedgehog familiar. And I think they like kind of ended up being almost like a Greek chorus to the characters in the book, which is kind of fun. And then at one point, there's one scene that we have where they're just talking to each other. And I really like, it feels like almost like an outtake or something that you'd see like a web cartoonist do, is like a little one-off side strip to have these like two minor characters having their own little like tip like on the like periphery of the book. But it was just so fun to draw them. And even though I have to say, like, for some reason, like drawing an owl was like really hard. I couldn't get from like, it took me so long to figure out like what makes an owl look like an owl and not like a hawk.
Yeah.
And so I just had like pages of drawings of owls in my sketchbook. Whereas a hedgehog came pretty quickly.
Hedgehogs, I guess they're the traits that you would render cartoonish are fairly obvious, but owls are already kind of cartoons. Like they have such big eyes and such tiny everything else pretty much that like they're just very humorous.
Like a lot of different kinds of owls. So I was stuck on the idea of him being like a specific kind of owl and not just like some general like platonic idea of an owl. So there was also that, like if you draw an owl and they have the little points, like I think that's a big owl tell, but you only really get that with a barn owl, which are pretty, or not a barn owl, a barred owl, which are like pretty big. And Archie is like maybe this big. So yeah, I don't think, you know, okay, if you could have an animal familiar, if you were inflicted with a loving animal that was always by your side, how horrible, what would you choose?
Gosh, that is a really, really good question. I don't know what I would.
Our pre-approved questions, guys, just so you know.
This is a shock question. This is my Frostnik moment where I am put on the spot. So I think the obvious choice is cat, because cats are what I own currently. But if we're talking about, you know, the opportunities that are raised by, you know, getting to now make this animal sentient and smart and magical, like I would probably pick a rabbit, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. They're really cute, really fun. I feel like they could get into some places for you if you needed them to. Like I don't want one that's too big. I want one that can sneak around. How about you?
I think I would go for like a tiger.
Nice.
So something like, it would still, you know, still cuddly, like still covered in soft fur, but also large and lethal.
Yeah, and you can ride it, which is like a factor I hadn't really considered. Like something that could also transport you is really compelling.
You know, tiger, you would have to like buy an extra seat on the plane.
That's true.
That's a little disadvantage. But also like hair just like all over the place.
Oh gosh, yeah. Constantly shedding.
Yeah. These are the considerations that you really gotta like nail down when you're talking about your animal familiar.
It's true. Like I feel like this is something I really need to think on. Perhaps like free write on, you know, do some draw some tarot cards and then maybe I'll know. I'm just dropping into the live stream, a site where you can buy both of our books. We have the new Embarrassment of Witches, which is what we've been talking about, as well as our old Darwin Carmichael is Going to Hell. So just a little treat for you.
And also while we're talking, if anybody who's watching has a question that you want to put into the chat, we are monitoring it and we will see it. So please let us know, or your own, what animal familiar would you choose?
Yes, I'm also curious about what you would all choose. So, feel free to hold forth. Are you ready for your next very difficult question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So which character that you created do you most identify with?
I think that in a number of my books, I tend to have like viewpoint characters that are not too far from my own. For example, like I think there are things that I really relate to in both like House of Women, Sarai is the main character there, and in Sydney in the Oven, and some of their experiences, not so much being on an alien planet filled with sexy alien creatures who are also murderous, but aside from that, like there's things that I relate to with them. But I think the character that's really like the closest to me as a person and to my own experience would be Rory from An Embarrassment of Witches. And I think a lot of that is that when we initially were talking about making the book, like we wanted, even though it's a mythological world with magic and silliness, you know, we wanted it to be firmly rooted in our own experiences coming of age after college and kind of like making that transition. And I think that even though Rory is much more ebullient and outgoing and even confident than I am, or certainly was at that age, I think that all her weaknesses are drawn straight from the source. Like I think that Rory, the kind of thing that she deals with a lot throughout the book is she's a lot a bit heedless of other people's feelings and kind of, you know, she doesn't really she doesn't like recognize that Angela is going through a hard time. She doesn't like notice when she says things that hurt other people as much. She's very wrapped up in herself. And that's definitely something that I, as a person, have had to deal with, of like not always being very aware of other people's emotions, or like running ramshot over someone else without really being aware of it. So her evolution on that throughout the book is something that I personally relate to. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. Same question to you. How would you feel? Who do you relate to the most of the characters that you've created?
Well, it does feel a little bit like a cheat answer, so I will give two, because the answer is Angela, who is the other protagonist of An Embarrassment of Witches. And the reason that it feels like a cheat is that, like, I'm not sure if we knew that we were doing this the entire time, but we definitely did at some point figure out that we were working through our own personalities and our dynamic as friends. And so to say that I identify with Angela is sort of like, I guess, a little self-evident, but I do really identify with her inability to sort of, I guess, have like a healthy sense of entitlement, and to express their feelings in a way. And that was something that I was absolutely working through in the years after college, when I was in my early to mid 20s, trying to sort of like figure out where you are in the world without stepping on anybody's toes is like a pretty hard way to go through your 20s. But the not cheat answer is Darwin, from Darwin Carmichael is Going to Hell. And I think I just really identify with his constant level of being slightly overwhelmed and stretched past his resources, and then how he just sort of like comes to live comfortably in that sort of mindset. Like, he's always a little bit baffled and a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit stretched thin. And I identify with him for that, in the same way that I used to identify with Arthur Dent from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who just always seems like so over his head. Like, the amount of over his head that he feels in space is how I feel walking through my everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, regarding Angela, we also like have all this stuff with academia that is really like sourced from her, and from Guy, who's like Rory's love interest in there and is a grad student. But like, all of that was you, essentially.
Oh yeah, that is like the way more obvious point of identification. Yeah, we're both grad students, and writing Angela was actually, and getting to write all of the scenes set in academia were incredibly therapeutic. Because I feel like just for all the years that I've been working on my dissertation, I've just been collecting these observations and these resentments, you know, so I get to put them all in this book.
Yeah, there's one scene where Rory is at like an academic party, like a mixer type thing, and her dad like works for the university, and he drags her to one of these parties, and she's like at the snack table, and there's all these conversations going on behind her, and I was just like, just write me like half a dozen of the most ridiculous lines that you can think of. Therapy things people actually say in academia. So yeah, that was fun. Definitely did make me feel like I missed out by not going to get my PhD in English literature.
You have to really be in it. You have to be committed.
Committed is the word.
Yeah. Oh, are you ready for your third question?
Bring it.
Let's do this. So, which book have you read the most number of times, and why?
I'm not a huge rereader, but I would say probably the book that I've reread the most is Remains the Day by Katsuo Ishiguro, which is one of my most favorite books. It's this, what else? He wrote this you wrote the book Never Let Me Go, which had a bit of a moment not too long ago and was like made into a movie. Remains the Day is also a movie. It's actually like a wonderful adaptation. And watching the movie is what brought me to the book. But so it's like this little novel about this guy who's a butler, and he serves in one of these like giant English manors. But it's kind of at the tail end of like when all of that is even happening. In some ways, it's not that far off from, it's not Gosford Park. What's that popular series?
Oh, Downton Abbey.
Yeah, it's like, it's a little bit like Downton Abbey, but before Downton Abbey. But it's, so he's just kind of like, you know, like the resources have like kept like going away, and like the staff has been reduced. And then point, the contemporary point in the novel, like the manor has been bought by an American millionaire. So he's kind of like serving this guy while reflecting back on his own like lifetime of service. Like this has been his, being a butler has been like the honor of his life, but the guy who owned the manor and who he served to and gave his entire life over was a Nazi sympathizer. And so it's like about him kind of coming to reckon with that. And it's just like the writing is just so beautiful and so contained, and so subtle. And there's like, and he doesn't like, you know, it's very English, so he doesn't really like talk about his emotions, but you kind of, through the interactions with the other characters and by reading between the lines, you can kind of like see that there's like a lot of very deep sadness in his life. And it's just like one of the best written books I've ever read. So Remains the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, highly recommended.
Nice. That makes a ton of sense for me too, because I really see a lot of that kind of pared down, subtle, what was it that one reviewer said about your work that I love so much? The boiled down complexity. Like I see that reflected in your work.
Or you could go with one of the more recent reviewers who describe my art as bubbly, which is an adjective that I will never forget. It's my favorite. Anyway.
If you had asked me like which one of us that term would be applied to first, I wouldn't have picked you.
Yeah, well, you know, it was about Embarrassment of Witches, so I guess it's fair, but I'm still like, I'm not crazy about that. Anyway, moving on. What is your favorite TV show?
So I have, I tend to also like cheat this question when I am asked it, because I feel like everybody has two favorites, I think, for a category. You have like your first favorite, like the first thing that you really loved, and your lifetime favorite. So I'm going to give you both because I think they're both important for different times of your life. My first ever favorite TV show was The X-Files, which I discovered probably when I was 10 years old, when it was in its second or third season, I think. At which time I was entirely too young for it. And I remained obsessed with it until I graduated high school. I was just so into that show. I was really fascinated with supernatural horror, and it gave that to me in spades. And I just loved the dynamic between the two leads. And I think that relationship between them was very important for me. They were two very important role models for me, I think. And my all-time favorite TV show is Deadwood from HBO. And I just love that show's the way that it draws so many rich characters together. It's one of the only shows, I think, that you know, every single character, however minor, could potentially be the lead of their own show. Like, they are so developed and so rich and so like integral to the story in their own little way, however small, that I think it's just like, it's hard to watch that show and not fall in love with everybody, you know, despite the fact that a lot of them are like morally reprehensible and like physically filthy, like physically and morally filthy, because it's the 19th century. But I just, that kind of writing, also just that the way I think that the dialogue really captures these characters in a way that feels really grounded, but also feels like almost Shakespearean, that I just really enjoy.
Yeah, it's a really solid show. Very, very sad in a lot of parts, though, kind of rough viewing.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of devastation in there.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, do you want to fire away?
Oh, I do have one more question. Yeah. Here we go. Okay, this one came in from Twitter, and it's a really good question that I am excited to hear the answer to, but also a little terrified. So what things are there that when I put them in a script and ask you to draw them, make you very angry?
Okay, well, I did mention buildings and how much I hate drawing them. Cars are another one that I just try to avoid as much as possible. There's like we have one scene that's set in a traffic jam, but it was like kind of a gimme because it was a mythological world. I was like, I mean, they don't have to be cars, right? They can be monsters that people are writing. I included a couple kind of like Miyazaki nods with the Howl's Moving Castle and the cat bus in there. And I just got to like play around with it. And I think there's like maybe a couple tiny cars. And then I would also say crowd scenes are like whenever I know I have to draw a big crowd scene, I'm just like, ugh. But I would much rather draw a crowd scene than draw more Gothic buildings. That was like, that was a tough day, that Gothic building.
Yeah.
I'll always remember Gothic building.
I feel like you know more about Gothic architecture than I do now. As a medieval historian, like you have a much more intimate relationship with it than I even do at this point.
Just like why are there all these like things everywhere? It's just very excessive how they like just adorn everything, and it just I don't know. I'm just like, I mean, I know some people. I guess people are much better drawers than me, or much more technically able, really enjoy drawing in perspective and stuff like that. But for me, my enjoyment of drawing is usually like organic things and like facial expressions and body language and that sort of stuff. So even though I draw science fiction, like the idea of like if I have a spaceship, I try like either it's really minimalist or it's a giant flying space slug. Because I just don't want to draw a lot of hardware. And you gotta aim to your ability. I mean, like, very likely, like if Jenn wrote something that I did not want to draw, I would just be like, well, let's just fake it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that probably, did I already talk about the mall scene? I think that, so there's one scene that's set in a mall, and drawing, I was like, okay, I'll just draw like a big shot of like the interior, like the central well of a mall to kind of set the scene. And then when I actually, like that was just in my thumbnail, I was just like, draw mall. And then when I actually came to draw it, I was like, oh, F me, like I don't want to do that. And so instead we like came up with all these like logos that were puns on real places, right? We had like, wait, I have it in here somewhere. It was like Taco Spell and what are the other, somewhere in here.
Oh, Aleister Crowley and Fitch, I think, or.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. I can't find it offhand, but so and so they're just the two figures walking, and then there's like this amorphous like floating thing of like different logos, and that was my mall shot. so like if you don't want to draw it, just cheat. That's what I figured out.
And like whatever sadness I may have experienced, like which I didn't really, but like I'm so excited about puns that I really was just like so drawn in by the idea that I got to think of more terrible mall puns. I didn't even really miss the actual physical mall disappearing from the comic.
Yeah, I think we had a special like chat date that that I called as like almost an emergency meeting. Me like we have to find as many logos that I can convert to puns as possible. And then we were like discussing that and doing like Google searches of like, because you know there's like very specific brands that are in malls now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And a lot of the methods were probably outdated.
yeah, for sure. I mean, malls are pretty outdated, really.
It's true.
In most, well, I mean, like not where I am. Malls are still pretty hot shit in Oklahoma.
Well, I do remember that, like, when you asked me to have that meeting, I specifically went to, like, the websites of several local malls to see what kinds of stores were in them currently, because my brain was still at, like, Delia's, you know, or, like, or, like, whatever that novelty gift shop was, the, one that sold, like, lava lamps and koosh balls and weird stuff, like blacklight posters. Yeah, Spencer's.
I will say, like, Claire's and Hot Topic still exist.
That's all that really matters. That Hot Topic is still out there. So.
Yeah, that is like the core of the mall as far as I'm concerned. The beating heart of the mall is Hot Topic.
Oh, it absolutely is.
All right, so we're 4 minutes over. Do we want to go for one last question, or do you think we should wrap it up?
I think we're good. Let's wrap it up. I think we covered most of the ground we need to, and I want to make room for the next people who are going to be on here. So all of these questions were to say that I love you very much, Sophie, and I'm glad that we worked together.
I love you too, Jen. I'm glad that we made this book together, and I hope that we do more.
Me too. All right, well, thanks to everybody who joined us. And yeah, we've left all of our links. You can check out our books if you like, and our Twitters and our Patreons. And yeah, thank you very much. And I will see all of you. And Sophie, I will see you later.
All right, thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.